I'll tell you what, Sean, you've got a week to go. 11 days till the Premier League, but a week to go to the Carabao Cup. What sort of shape are you in as a squad and a bunch of players?
Well, we're getting injuries back, which has been good. Ashley Barnes is back with us training, only yesterday though, but training with the first team, if you like, as normal, so that's pleasing. And he's feeling good so far. Obviously, it's early yet. He's fit as regards to the science side of things. It's now about the football side of things. So it's very early yet, but he's showing good signs. Cork is going to be a little bit longer, obviously, but making good progress. Ben Mee's still got a slight niggle in his thigh, so although he's out there and he's getting work done, he's still not with us yet. So they're the main three at the moment. The other lads who'd had a few ups and downs, Johan in the past and Robbie and Woody, for example, they're all good at the moment. And obviously Robbie got 90 minutes in the other day. Johan didn't go with the international scene, but he's got some training in here and a game, of course, as well. So I think on the in-house, I think then that's favourable. And obviously on the outer-house, then we're still looking.
Yeah, how's that search going? Because I mean, as the clock ticks down, I know obviously the games are coming soon, but you've got a big window still left till October the 5th.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite clear and quite evident that we need people in. We lost a few last season, so we definitely need people in. We're trying to affect that. It's, as I said, in every window, it's rare that we get business done early. So still waiting on the reality of the situations, the ones that we feel we've got a chance.
Yeah, I mean, there was tons of speculation on what the kind of knock-on effect to prices would be from COVID. What are you kind of discovering there? Is there a kind of a lessening off, or the prices kind of remaining about the same that you're being quoted?
Well, if you think back the last couple of years, it's the same words I've used before. The market doesn't really care what we think. The market is not run by Burnley Football Club. So the market will make its own mind up. What I would suggest currently, when you look at the figures going around, Sheffield United are still spending, Newcastle now spending, Villa are attempting to spend again. There's money out there because they're all putting it in. So, and the superpowers are spending. Or certainly, obviously, Chelsea being the obvious one. I appreciate that a time when they couldn't buy players. So maybe that's their thirst is a bit, or they've got more of a thirst, let's say, to work in the market. But the numbers still look pretty large to me. So I think it's unlikely that you're going to be getting bargain basement buys. I think. Nor should we really be looking in that area. We've got to look in people that we think can at least challenge our group with immediate effect and either mature into the side or, of course, go into the side because they're very good players. So I think that's the market we're attempting to look in. Obviously, the finances will give us parameters that can only go so far.
Are you close to anything? And I know we're talking numbers-wise.
We're not close to anything at the moment, no. But that's often the case. When I've been here all these years, it's very rare, apart from cheaper deals, not cheap, but cheaper deals that we tended to got done a bit quicker. But anything that has any, sort of, well, in our world, when you start adding millions onto it, then it's a difficult moment in time for me to get them players done.
But numbers-wise, are you looking at kind of three or four? Is that the sort of ballpark in terms of additions?
Well, the chairman and the board spoke to me about the numbers they felt were needed over the coming sort of 18 months. So they're aware of what's needed. It's how many we can push on, and then it's not only push on. There's always speculation about names and prices, but at the end of the day, it only matters what comes in. It's only the outcome. We could be linked with everyone. As I said, we were linked with Messi, rightly so. It looks like he's settled again, so that's unfortunate for us. But no, generally speaking, it's about getting them in. It's about getting the outcomes, not the sort of process to try and get the outcomes.
But also about keeping rather than letting players go as well. I mean, you're in a strong position. I mean, we know that there's been interest and even an offer for James Tarkowski. Where does that situation lie right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's in a kind of healthy way, we've had speculation on our players from, the first year I was here. Back in the day, it was Charlie Austin, then Danny Ings and Trips, and, more latterly when you go on to your Michael Keanes and your Andre Greys, and recently some of our players as well. The main three, the obvious three that have been linked, Whitey and Popey and Tarky, and, there's as well behind them. But that's kind of, been involved in the history that I've had here. So I don't think it's new to us. The club's in a very, very strong position financially, that's for sure. So there's no overwhelming desire to be selling players. That's quite obvious. Do players have a price at any club? Yes, they do. We've seen that across the board, across the whole of football. Eventually, a day comes, if someone's going to hit a certain number, then all clubs, not just Burnley Football Club, have to make a decision. If that comes, the chairman will make that decision. I don't control their moments, the chairman does, and the board. So we'll have to wait and see. But it's fair to say we're in a very strong position. So therefore, we're certainly not in the business of getting rid of our best players on the cheap, that's for sure.
But in James Tarkowski's case, is that price tag around about 50 million? Is that the sort of figure?
No, the price tag is what someone offers us when the board and the chairman say yes. That's what the price tag is.
And at the moment, he's happy, obviously, to be a Burnley player, and you're happy to have a season where you're planning with him.
Yeah, I mean, look, with Tarky, I think like a number of people in the game, I think we're all, on this occasion, I'm quite amazed, actually, that he was not in the England side, or certainly in the England squad, sorry. And Dyche as well. That's been a big surprise to me. But as I've said very, very many times, actually, I've got a really good relationship with Eddie Boothroyd for obvious reasons, and with Gareth. Totally respect. It's not easy to make them decisions of who you're calling up. But I think on this occasion, it's probably the most surprised I've been with Tarky that he's not involved with the England setup for these games.
You mentioned Gareth Southgate before I did. He talked yesterday about the kind of role of the manager being a different thing. He talked about being almost a dad to some of these players with what happened with Phil Foden and Mason Greenwood. Has that role changed? Has there have to be kind of more?
I think the biggest change. I think the biggest change in that, and it's. I will say, I think it's tougher with the England side of things because you've got this difference of different characters, different players, all coming in and out of the England setup at any given time, all from different backgrounds in the clubs, different cultures, different environments. Different managers and coaches laying down the kind of responsibility for playing for their clubs, and then they go to play for England, let's say. So I think that's probably more tricky to lay down them guidelines. This is how we work. I think in this case, I think the modern challenge of a manager is not so much on the pitch. I don't think there's many managers who don't know what they want on the pitch, regardless when people shout that you don't know what you're doing, but that's standard. I think most managers know what they're doing. Off the pitch is changing radically because of social media. It has changed enormously. I think probably the surprise to me, looking from the outside in, is two young, highly talented players have actually got trapped in that social media world. Trust me, my lad who's 17 knows a lot more about social media than I do. So that's probably the surprise to me, that's happened when in a world that is their world now. Youngsters now, social media is a massive part of their being. So I think that's probably the surprise to me. Can it happen? Yes, I'm sure it can. Has it happened? Yes. Is it an anomaly that it's happened? Well, the only thing for me is that these youngsters are very sharp on that sort of thing. So that's probably the biggest surprise.
And I imagine the other difficult thing is you had the kind of COVID and the precautions there and what players have to go through almost on a daily basis. And you have to keep reminding them that this has to be done as you would do a parent with children washing your hands and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think. Look, I'm not going to over-egg that one because I will say I think it's a strange situation now for the players and for the staff and for football clubs because our guidelines are miles in front of just living. So I like to think I'm a pretty steady fella, and people could question if I'm out doing whatever in a restaurant or having a pint or whatever, and yet I go into my workplace and it's super stringent on everything. We're still doing big distances to eat. We're still doing big distances, wherever we can, all the necessary things, and yet I can walk out my training ground and just walk down the road. So I think there is, and have lunch or do whatever with less stringent rules. So I don't want to over question players on that because I think it is tough. They come into this environment where it's really, really super tight on the rules and all we should do, and COVID specialists guiding and advising, and yet the rules of the country are different. So I do think that's tricky, for players because they've got lives as well. They're allowed to live their lives and they can live by the rules outside of the building. Not just inside of the building. So I think I'm certainly not going to judge players on that because I think it's a bit more tricky than people think.
When you looked on last season and you looked at 10th place, is that about where you think kind of Burnley are at the moment, or was that punching?
No, I think I've said many times every season's a restart. We've had a lot of challenges at the end of the season, losing players, the end of last season, losing players. We haven't corrected that so far. There's no guarantees to every season we're in the Premier League, that's for sure. We have to work hard for everything. We have to work hard for every inch of what we get here. So no, we don't go on them guidelines. I just think if you're going on them sort of guidelines, that's when you've got to invest heavily every year. And you see the growth in clubs often, not always, often, they keep investing year on year on year to then find that kind of level where they think they're appropriately at and then see if they can go beyond that, of course. That's not always the case here. So we have to remodel, replan and restart every season with an open mind to take on the challenge.
But I guess one priority is starting this season better than you started last season. I think it was 3 wins after 3 months, which then meant you had to finish fast.
I think that the the idea of every club, by the way, no matter what the challenges that you face are, is to find a way of being as strong, if not stronger, than the previous season. That's regardless, money or no money. That's just regardless of that. Now, you do that through development of your players, education of your players, their own personal development, how they're moving forward. But of course, I think it is appropriate, and certainly in our case, we have to be invested in the side because we've lost players. So it's a numbers game, and also supporting the group that we've got. You know, we can only give so much support as a staff. Eventually, as a player, I've been one for 20 years. It's a good feeling when you see someone coming in and you think, all right, you know, let's see what they've got to offer. And that, of course, pushes the group as well. You know, it's not just the coaching style and the coaching methods. Often it's that challenge that comes with putting new bodies into a group, that stimulus that comes where they think, all right, okay, there's another challenge, another threat, if you like, coming my way. And players often respond to that. So I think we've got to find that balance that we've looked to do many times.
But kind of taking that into account, does it make it more difficult having to do your transfer business late without a pre-season? Because you'll be winning games by what you say, you know what you're saying in terms of time.
Yeah, I mean, look, James, you've known us a long time. Doing business early costs a lot of money. You know, this club historically has not been in a situation where it wants to do that. So therefore, that's just part of my time here. That's been, you know, well documented for nearly 8 years, approaching 8 years. So it's not a new challenge, but it is a challenge because you're not getting the time to work with the players and integrate them as quickly as you'd like. So that's the moment when it does go out of my hands, you know, to get these deals done.
Just a final point from me. I looked at the kind of the stats from last season, and your home record and your away record are pretty much similar, and they were when you finished with 54 points, you know, a couple of seasons ago. Is that a sign that this group of players is used to playing in the Premier League, or at least it's not spooking them going away from Turf Moor?
I think some of what comes with experience in the Premier League is learning about the different ways that you have to find results. You know, there is a gap between home and away. We know that statistically. I mean, particularly, you know, teams outside the sort of superpowers there is. As everyone knows, our first season in the Premier League, we found it very difficult. Didn't get our first win until later on in the season. We addressed that as a staff as well. Looked at different ways that we were working. We addressed it with the players. I'm pleased to say the players, hopefully from guidance we give them, but also their natural maturation into being a Premier League player, you know, or a more recognised Premier League player, and a more experienced Premier League player. I think that adds its part as well. So a lot of credit for the players. But it is difficult. Statistically, away in the Premier League is very difficult. It is at home, by the way. But usually, team stats are better at home. We're finding a nice balance over the last few seasons where we've at least been getting some, I think, at least decent points away from home. Whereas our first season in the Premier League was very tough. I'm pleased to see that we've adjusted that, we've looked to adjust it, and the players have taken that on.
Top stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. Thanks very much. Alex Howell of the BBC. Are you there, Alex?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hi, Alex.
Thank you.
Alex, how are you?
Oh, yeah, not bad. How are you? Sorry if I touch on a couple of questions you've answered. I've been having some technical problems, so thank you. So lots of people are complimentary of what you achieve at Burnley and the job you've done. How do you keep battling against the odds, and how do you keep that going, and what do you hope to achieve this season?
I think we work on realities. I think we know the challenges. I think our players are fantastic within that. They, you know, last year when players left the building, they stayed focused on the job in hand. I think we've been knocked a few times down the years, and I think our players respond to that because that's not new ground for them. So they deserve massive amounts of credit. I mean, look, I've always said, you know, my belief in coaching and management, you can only give good information and guide them to where they want to be, or hopefully want to be, which is improving and developing. And I think we've done well with that. So I think the challenges that come our way, we're kind of used to them. We know we continually need support because that's just the way it is in the Premier League. But sometimes that support can be at least started, and it always is here, in-house. It starts with what we can provide the players, what they're going to look at each other to provide themselves and the team, and then we build on the back of that. So I think they deserve a massive amount of credit.
I caught the back end of the recruitment question there. So in terms of recruitment, does that limit where you can get to, or do you think you can still achieve your best ever finish without it?
Well, I've spoken of the guidelines here for many seasons, you know, and they're pretty tough at times. You know, there's a certain manner that the chairman and the board want the club to run. I understand it. I've been here a long time, and I've been talking about stretching that for certainly 2-3 seasons now. It's always a question mark. So we don't do budgets, so I never know what the budget is. So we're just going to have to wait and see, you know, what's available and how far we can push it.
So how how soon or how late in the window will you know how far you can push it? Is it deal by deal, or is that conversation ongoing?
Yeah, it's just ongoing, and fingers crossed time that deals can be pushed through, because the sooner the better, regarding planning, regarding getting them players into your group, working with your group, getting used to what you want from them and what the group kind of demand is, if you like, and the culture, the environment, etc., etc. The longer it goes, it's harder for the players, it's harder for them as well as individuals to come in and affect the group with immediacy. So, it's a tough challenge. We've been through this before, virtually every season, like I say, particularly if we're pushing the market a bit higher in our world, not in everyone else's world, but in our world. Some of the ones that we managed to nick a bit of a deal on, they're a bit easier because obviously the numbers are not as big. When the numbers get bigger, that's when it goes right out of my hands and into the chairman and the board, and then that's up to them then. Because as I said, I've never had a budget here in 8 years, so I just have to hope that they're going to put some money available to get them deals done.
And on Tarkowski, how much harder is it now to find a deal like that in the current market?
Yeah, I mean, when you look, Tarky, Popey, Johan Goodmanson and these kind of players, and you look at the amount of money spent on what you've got, then it's fair to say when you do look at our business, I think we've done very well over the years. I think something like a net spend, in our time since I've been over about plus £9 million, I think. But when you think what's on the pitch now, the value of what's on the pitch, I think we've invested that money pretty well. It's fair to say. But I must say, the market at that time, don't forget, was offering that situation. The market's changed. As we were discussing earlier, the market's changed. Then I felt maybe 5-6 years ago, there was more balance to the market and what you could almost imagine where players were going to be with a price. Now, there's no rules. Now the price could be anything. You bring about a player, any club, it could be just through the roof. You just never know. So I think it's got more tricky and more difficult with that, and how the opposite club see the market. So they might not see it the same as you, therefore the prices are radically different than they were sort of 4 or 5 years ago.
Thank you. And finally, Ben Mee spoke excellently last year on Black Lives Matter. Do you know if there's any chat amongst the captains about marking that during the current season?
I'm not aware of anything at the moment, but what they did do, as you know, they formed like a group through that period. So I'm sure they'll be discussing ongoing thoughts on, what their role, if you like, is.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.